All right, let's open in prayer. Father in heaven, I thank you that we have this opportunity to once again study the scriptures, to learn about ourselves, to learn about how we can better please you and be the children of light you call us to be. If salt loses its saltiness, it's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under feet. But you've made us to be salt of the world, to stop the putrefying effect of sin in people's lives. You caused us to be light on a hill where all can see and be drawn to its source. Help us when it comes to our relationship to people, especially those who are of a different ethnic background than we have, or different color skin that we have, that we all together would desire to love them, to be compassionate, to be caring, to be Christ-like in our attitudes, in our speech, and in our desires. Lord, bless us with your truth, I pray. I pray this for your glory. Amen. Well, we started last week, and the past papers are up here if you need to collect them sometime. You can collect them. After class, it'll be easy to pick up what you want. This is the one we're on currently. There's a few. Does anybody need one for today? Okay, if you have one already, it might be good just to keep that one. But if not, Valerie, I'm sure can pump out a few for us today if we need them. We need any more there? Save one for her to. Thanks, Val. She's going to make some more. No, they'll be fine. She's going to make some more. Yeah. So last week we started this area of the hatred between the Jews and the Samaritans, which was long-lived. For several centuries it began. It started during the divided kingdom era of Israel's history, when 10 tribes went to the northern section of Palestine, of Israel at the time, and found Samaria to be their capital city, and 2 tribes stayed in the south in Judea, where the temple was, and they worshiped there. And they stayed divided for centuries, and then God punished them for their idolatry and their division in things by having the king of Assyria, Sennacherib, come and invade the northern kingdom of Israel, which was in Samaria, take them captive, and he left some of the citizens of Assyria stay in the country and to intermarry and have children with the poor people that were left in the country to be sure that the farming was taken care of and the land didn't become non-productive. And then for a long time this happened. Even when they returned, they still continued to have this situation. People in the southern were taken to Babylon with King Nebuchadnezzar, and for 70 years they were under captivity in Babylon. And they also had at times intermarriage and thing that happened within them too, and especially through the centuries as they went by. And you read these things in the Old Testament scriptures and in Nehemiah and various things where they told all those that were intermarried to leave their spouse and children and to just stay with Israelites. A lot of things are there for you on this, but they saw themselves as pure blood Jews, and they didn't see the Jews in Samaria as pure blood Jews. They saw them as not pure blood, and therefore they were against them. They hated them. They did not like them. They did not accept them. And this is recorded very plainly through the scriptures. We went through that last week, just reviewing with you now. And by the time of Jesus' day, what happens is that he often uses the Jews' relationship to the Samaritans and the Samaritans to the Jews as an example to teach what it means to have a Christ-like attitude and spirit towards other ethnicities, what we're supposed to be doing. What's probably the most famous passage that Jesus used to teach this? It's in Luke chapter 10. What's the most famous passage, do you think? Luke chapter 10. What's the most famous passage? Without looking it up.
Good Samaritan.
Good Samaritan, right. The Good Samaritan
Yeah.
passage where the teachers of the law were trying to defend himself and not get caught with what Jesus had to say. He said, well, who's my neighbor? And Jesus taught them who his neighbor was, and he used the illustration of the Good Samaritan, which we're not going to review. We did that last week. Now, we left off with John 4 last week, where the woman at the well, and you saw that she was discriminated against for various reasons. Not only was she a Samaritan, but what other reasons was she discriminated against for?
An outcast.
She was an outcast because
She was undesirable.
she was an immoral woman.
Yeah.
She had 5 husbands, and the man she was living with currently was not her husband, and she was looking for love in all the wrong places, and she was such an outcast that she couldn't go with the other women to the well in the morning or in the evenings when they typically went to draw water. They wouldn't let her be with them. She had to go by herself at noontime, and that's when Jesus met her at the well. And you saw what he said there, that his whole reason for going north was to go there to see this woman get saved. And she was the first and he told her that. Salvation he gave her, and they went back to Sychar with Jesus, and following her went back to Sychar, the town that they were in Samaria, and they stayed a couple more days, and many others came to believe on Jesus. Many more Samaritans came to believe on Jesus through their testimony. How shocking do you think that probably was to the disciples? Bodie, what would you think? Disciples, what would you think?
Why her?
Yeah, you might start by saying, why her, right? Why? And why would you say that? Be honest, why would you say that?
Because she was an outcast.
Be more honest.
Immoral.
She was an immoral person. Why would Jesus want to, why would he want to talk to her? Why would he want to demonstrate, to reveal to her that he's the Messiah and for her to find salvation? Why her? And then not just why her, but why who else?
Everybody else she wanted to talk to.
All the other Samaritans that she talked to in Sychar. And why are we going to have to stay here? Can you imagine how good the sleep was for the disciples? I'm sure Jesus slept well. But how good the sleep was for the disciples while they're in Sychar? They probably got one eye open the whole time.
Right.
Why? What was at the root of it? I want you to identify the sins that were at the root of it.
Fear.
Fear, number one. Fear. Fear of what?
Being killed.
Y'all said at the same time. I couldn't hear you. Fear of what?
The Samaritans.
What about the Samaritans?
That they might hurt him.
That they might hurt them, right? They might do some physical harm to them. What else? What other fear?
That they're with Jesus.
I don't think that's a big fear.
Okay.
They're with Jesus, they should find comfort. But what are they all afraid besides that they might hurt them?
Might take on their ways.
Yeah? Something more basic and it's like so obvious.
How about jealousy? They were jealous because
They might have had jealousy, I imagine. They were afraid he's going to save more of these people.
Oh.
That's the whole point. They were afraid he's going to save more of these people. And if he does, what are we going to have to do?
Accept him.
Accept them,
be with them.
Be with them.
be with them, love them. Yeah, all these things that their hatred and their fear has caused them to not want to do. And You understand that we sum all this up by calling it prejudice. But I don't like to use that word, not because it's a bad word, but I don't like to use it because it's not in the Bible. I like to use biblical terms that are in the Bible if the Bible has a biblical term for it, because if the Bible has a biblical term for it, what does it also have? A biblical solution for it. So if you looked up prejudice in the Bible, you're not going to find any. But if you look up hatred,
You'll find it.
you're going to find verses that talk about hatred, right?
Yes.
Anger,
Yeah. Sin?
sin, anger enough to kill somebody. If you look up pride, you know what? They're all that. They got it. And doesn't have it. What's at the root of that?
Right.
Pride. It's a sense of ethnic superiority because of the color of their skin or because of their background, of having ethnic superiority over others, and that's sin. Because how many races are there?
One.
And Jesus tells us to love whom?
Everybody.
All human beings. And we get in trouble when we start to have problems and we start to put people in different levels of life. I know people that have a problem with people that don't have as much money as they do. Economic discrimination, economic hatred, pride in their economics, pride in their education. Because their education is better, they won't talk to somebody who doesn't have a degree like they do. Unless you've been to college, I want nothing to do with you. People with all kinds of hatreds and the fact that they accept their people on their own level and they above them, higher than them. They want to be like them. This is all sin. It's nothing but pure sin. And we're going to look later at this, what the scriptures identify, where all these sins, how they're named and what these sins are. But that was the problem with the Samaritan woman. When Jesus said, I must go through Samaria, right then, he gets this woman and her, why are you talking? What's her first question? Why are you talking with this woman? You shouldn't be doing that. Don't you know who she is? So Jesus used the Samaritans many times as an example of the hatred that the disciples had to other people. Look with me now at Acts chapter 8. No, go to Acts chapter 1 first. I'm sorry, I'm missing it. I'm not so sure they were thrilled when they heard Jesus say this. Acts chapter 1, look at verses 6 through 8. This is just before his ascension. Then they gathered around Jesus and asked him, Lord, are you at this time going to restore the kingdom to Israel? What was their concept so far about restoring the kingdom to Israel? What did they basically think that was going to be? Yeah. Yeah. It was going to be a physical, political kingdom where they were eventually going to get to do what? Reign with him and be in charge of all the Romans and everybody else, that they were going to be on top. And they're thinking, and even if it was the spiritual, they still had it wrong. He said, it is not for you to know the times or dates the Father has set by his own authority, but you'll receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem. They didn't want to hear any ends. They wanted to stay with Jerusalem. Why? Jerusalem was filled with who? With Jews. And in Judea, okay, all right, they got Jews there, right out, that's the territory that Jerusalem is in. And Samaria, I'm sure they did not like hearing that word again. And to the ends of the earth. Not just the Samaritans, but to the ends of the earth. And we're going to get that record now in Acts. Let's look at Acts chapter 8. Well, of course they told that the whole Old Testament calls them the chosen ones. But the New Testament says that everybody who has faith in Jesus is part of the chosen ones. We're going to get to that in Ephesians 2 eventually when we talk about the unity in the body of Christ, of Jews and Gentiles alike. But in Acts chapter 8, verses 4 through 25, the beginning of Acts 8, the church gets scattered by persecution, so it breaks up. The church in Jerusalem breaks up, and that's in fulfillment of what Jesus said is going to happen to you. He said, you're going to go to Judea and Samaria, but they didn't realize the way they were going to get there was through persecution, because they weren't voluntarily leaving the area. So he had to get them out, and persecution did that. And Saul began to destroy the church in verse 2 of chapter 8. Going from house to house, he dragged off both men and women, put them in prison. Then in verse 4, those who had been scattered preached the word wherever they went. Philip went down to a city in Samaria and proclaimed the Messiah there. That was a bold move on Philip's part. He followed, he obeyed the Lord and did what he was told. When the crowds heard Philip and saw the signs he performed, they all paid close attention to what he said. For with shrieks impure spirits came out of many, and many who were paralyzed or lame were healed. So there was great joy in the city. Now, for some time, a man named Simon had practiced sorcery in the city and amazed the people of Samaria. And this is the story about what happens to him. And that's not part of our lesson for today, but you could read that whole story and see what happened. May your money perish with you, he told him, because of his hypocrisy. Then you get down to chapter 8, verse 26, where he now talks to an Ethiopian. Where's an Ethiopian from? Ethiopia. Good deduction. Where's Ethiopia? Right next to Judea? Huh? Where's Ethiopia? Africa. And it's below what nation in Africa? Egypt. Now in Egypt there was a mixed population of dark-skinned Africans and lighter-skinned Africans, but mostly, and some Asians. It was a mixture of ethnicity, but mostly the Mediterranean style of a mixture, though there were a lot of black Egyptians, because Ethiopia is just below Egypt. Ethiopia is the country just below Egypt that was all black, mostly all black. Dark-skinned Africans and all the rest of Africa as well were all dark-skinned Africans. Now that's important, because as we're going to see here, I want you to understand and see that from the very beginning, God included not just some, but a lot of dark-skinned Africans in the leadership of the church and in the salvation and the start of a church. It's recorded in the annals of church history that the largest and the first fastest growing church was in Ethiopia, was a black church in Ethiopia. I gotta tell you this ahead of time, because I just find it so funny in a bad way. So the Mediterraneans and the black-skinned Africans made up, and some Asians made up the beginning of the church when it comes to the nationality of them. When did the whites When did Caucasians enter that mix? How many years later do you think? I'm not going to make you guess. 800! Yes! 800, well, good. Now you do. 800 years later was the first example of Caucasians coming into Christianity. Maureen, your face is getting like, huh? Really? Yes, really. Now, there were lighter skinned folks that weren't Caucasians, that were from the Mediterranean area, like Italy and Spain, but they still were ethnically different than the Caucasians that were further up in Europe. Europe did not get the gospel for a while. And when they finally did, boy, a lot of problems happened. But we're not going to get into church history with all that. But I just want you to understand, because we who are Caucasians seem to have an attitude about us that just seems like, well, we were always there. In fact, when we draw pictures of Jesus, we make him look like what? Like a white, blue-eyed Caucasian, right? When you look at a children's Bible, and you look at an older children, the newer ones do a better job. When you look at an older children's Bible, the people in there are all white. When I was in Malawi, I saw a lot of paintings, and they did paintings of Jesus visiting church, talking to people in church. Guess what color their Jesus was? Black. You know why? Because they're black. And the early church was made up of a mixture of ethnicities. We're going to get to it real soon here, but a mixture of ethnicities. And keep your finger in Revelation 5 and 7, because it's important you understand that in heaven, there's going to be people from every nation, tribe, and language in heaven. The kingdom of God is made up of a variety of ethnicities. Imagine telling Jesus you don't like them. Now, you wouldn't say that with your words, but you say it with your actions. Jesus, when he taught the sermon on the parable of the Samaritan, did he say that it's okay to be fearful and walk on the other side of the road? No. How does Jesus, Pam, you're doing a good job. How does Jesus take away that fear? What does he say? What does he say? Fear not, for I am with you. Right. What else does he say about fear? Don't fear what they fear. What else? Perfect love casts out all fear. Now, you have to use wisdom and listen to the Holy Spirit in your life, convicting your heart and your mind about stuff. But fear is never the reason not to do something. We have to walk into the face of fear many times. As a Christian, if you think you can live your life avoiding fear, you're not going to live a good Christian life. I'll tell you that right now. Not going to live a good Christian life. In areas where I probably should have been the most afraid, I have found the most peace and joy. And that's the truth. We sang a song last week. Be exalted, O God. That little chorus, you know that one? I actually led that, if you can believe me, singing a cappella. And God gave me the voice to do it at the time. It was remarkable. I tried afterwards, it didn't work. I led that to a group of 5 or 6 others that were with me in a holding cell in a jail in Atlanta, Georgia. We got arrested for doing a abortion protest, and long story, but we got put in jail, and they kept us in this holding cell, men and women together, for several hours until about 2 o'clock in the morning. Then they took us out and put us in a different section where we could get some sleep. And we sang the whole time we're in there. The whole time we're in there. And we were going to get put in an area with inmates that had done crimes, or at least they were accused of it. There was no fear. God overcomes that when you're serving him and following him. And what is there to fear? Don't fear the one who has the power over your body, but fear him who has the power over the body and the soul, right? And fear is not an excuse that God accepts for showing hatred to another group of people. And here's another problem with fear. You get me on my pogo stick here a second. Once you're afraid of this person, you know what the tendency is? Anybody who looks anywhere near like this person, you're also afraid of. You castigate a whole group of people by the actions of one person, right? And you're afraid of the rest. I was talking with Alvis this morning. I grew up working on a farm in South Jersey, and I was the minority. I was a white guy, and the rest of them were either Puerto Ricans that came from the slum areas of Puerto Rico to make money to send to their families, or blacks. And we worked together in all things. And I learned an awful lot. And I learned not to be afraid. They're human beings. And I learned that every morning they invited me to share their coffee with them. And their arroz y frijoles, their rice and beans with them. And you learn that these are people just like you. And that's the thing that Jesus is trying to teach us. These are people who need to be loved just like you. Did you want to say something? What? My brother.
Today, this area, Neptune City, is known to be
Shark River Hills.
Yeah.
They burnt crosses in the backyard years ago in Shark River Hills. They burned a cross.
So when I heard about you,
Uh-oh, we're in trouble.
a true man of God, a teacher, I would have been not wanting to come over here. But the Spirit said, you want the word, you get it there, just ignore everybody else. And that's how I've been since I came, focusing on you and what you're teaching. And anybody else who is prejudiced, I'm not paying them any mind.
Are you finding some they're not prejudiced?
My spirit makes me feel a few tingles. Good feeling when I do feel accepted by sincere.
Good.
Believe me, you can tell.
Oh, I know you can tell. Put yourself in the other position. You can tell.
Yeah. But I appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you. And I'm glad that you came, because it took a lot of courage to come not knowing anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So the Lord said to Philip, go south on the road to the desert road that goes from Jerusalem to Gaza. So he started out, and on his way he met an Ethiopian eunuch. Now this guy has 2 strikes against him. What are the 2 strikes? He's an Ethiopian, and he's a eunuch. Why does a eunuch have a strike against him? Do you remember in the Old Covenant what it said about eunuchs? They weren't allowed to do what? Couldn't worship in the temple. Couldn't be accepted. because of being eunuchs. And whether they were a eunuch actually physically or whether they were one positionally, they weren't accepted. So this man had a double whammy. He was a black man that was a eunuch. He was an important official in his own country, in charge of the treasury of Candace. This is Candake, which means Queen of the Ethiopians. We would, in history, she's called Candace. This man had gone to Jerusalem to worship, and on his way home was sitting in his chariot. So he already was a God-fearing man because he was doing what? He was going to Jerusalem to worship, and on his way home he was sitting in his chariot. That's not where a common laborer sits. He's the queen's eunuch, sitting in his chariot, reading the book of Isaiah the prophet. And the fact that he could have a scroll of Isaiah is also amazing. The prophet. The Spirit told Philip, "Go to that chariot and stay near it." Then Philip ran up to the chariot, heard the man reading Isaiah the prophet. "Do you understand what you're reading?" Philip asked. "Well, how can I," he said, "unless someone explains it to me?" So he invited Philip to come up and sit with him. This is the message of Scripture the eunuch was reading. And it's from Isaiah 53. You're probably very familiar with this. "He was led like the sheep to the slaughter, and as a lamb before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. In his humiliation he was deprived of justice, and who can speak of his descendants, for his life was taken from the earth." The eunuch asked Philip, "Tell me, please, who is the prophet talking about, himself or someone else?" Then Philip began with that very passage of Scripture and told him the good news about Jesus. As they traveled along the road, they came to some water, and the eunuch said, "Look, here is water. What can stand in the way of me being baptized?" And then some later manuscripts, not the earlier ones, but some later manuscripts, only in one section where the manuscripts went to a region, does it include verse 37, which is in your footnotes there probably, that it says, "If you believe with all your heart, you may." And the eunuch answered, "I believe that Jesus is the Son of God." That was only in later manuscripts. It was not in all the earlier manuscripts that have been discovered so far. So they really don't think it was part of the original writing of Acts, but was added by a scribe. And as he gave orders to stop the chariot, then both Philip and the eunuch went down into the water, and Philip baptized him. And when he came up out of the water, the Spirit of the Lord suddenly took Philip away. So was he accepted as part of this new covenant community? Yes. What did he go through that shows his acceptance? He was baptized. And for them to be baptized was to be a member of the church. He was accepted into the fellowship as an Ethiopian eunuch, where in Judaism, unless he was a foreigner that came and followed to be in the temple, he was not allowed. But in the new covenant, he's accepted fully as a member of the community. Very important to see. Questions on that? Any points to make about it? Yes, Bill.
If I met a Samaritan, how would I know that they were Samaritan? I mean,
Okay. Let me use a little illustration. Y'all come back now here.
okay.
Accent.
Their accent gave them away.
Okay.
Plus some features that they had that were different by being intermarried with others. Hair, color of skin, shade of skin, certain things that you would recognize. If you live in an area where everybody is exactly the same ethnicity, any variation to that is easily seen. We don't see it because we have a lot of mixtures of ethnicity, thank God. And we don't know, what you are. We can usually guess if somebody's roots come from Europe, like German or England, as compared to Spain or Italy or South America or Polynesian were Asian. We could tell that by slight differences. But the biggest difference was when they talked. They talked differently. Yeah. I don't know why y'all thought I talked differently when I came here, but you did. Thought I was from Georgia.
I had to think about asking this, but I really don't get, what, I should probably, what a eunuch is, or how.
That's what I was just thinking.
How do you pick out a eunuch?
A eunuch physically was someone who was unable to have children. They were emasculated. Enough said?
Why did they do that?
Yeah, why-
Do a whole class.
I'll let you go to Google and check it out. They were in charge of the harem many times, Pam. Pam, they were in charge of the harem many
Got
times.
it, okay.
You're okay, I'm glad you.
I got it now.
I'm glad you.
I was looking it up.
And it wasn't that they
I
just
thought that's what
couldn't,
it was.
it
but I-
wasn't that they just couldn't make somebody pregnant. They had no desire
Oh,
because it was taken completely away by being castrated.
Oh,
Okay.
I thought that's what.
Biology class along with Bible
Who
class.
made the decision? to-
Not the person.
No, that's what I'm saying. Who,
That's what.
like the king, or whoever owned the harem?
Okay, well, we're going to end with this question. Usually it was somebody that was captive and they did it to punish them, usually. Sometimes it was done out of kindness because they liked the guy and they wanted to put them in a service that was high up in the king's palace. But enough said about eunuchs. I'd rather talk about Ethiopians. Okay, Carol?
That we don't have to have had a particular incident with somebody from another ethnic group to have picked up a dislike for them based on our culture, our media,
Oh, sure.
portrayals in the movie.
Yeah.
I just want to, sometimes to make
It's the whole group that we just, it's not just the person. That's what I was saying earlier. It's not just disliking this person. We make a judgment against the whole, all of them together.
Right, but my point is, we don't have to have had, we ourselves do not have to have had a particular
No.
encounter to have picked this up
Yes.
from around us. So
Yes.
we can go around saying, well, I haven't had anybody doing bad to me, I don't hate them, but you don't realize how much has impacted
Right.
you
You
from.
could have a family meal, and somebody at the family meal tells a story, and now you don't like them either. No. You didn't have to have the personal experience yourself. You could learn it from your culture. You can learn it from a book. You can learn it from a group of workers at work, and the attitudes that they have, and something they say, a bad joke that they tell. You can learn it from many places. You don't have to have the bad experience yourself, you're right. Because a sinful mind, that's what controls us, is a sinful mind, and we have to overcome that in Jesus. And anger and dislike, that what we call prejudices, which are summed up by all this, they can be learned, they can be taught. You don't have to experience them all. They can just be taught. You ever heard the phrase dumb farmers? Huh? You ever heard that?
I've heard it.
Okay. I say you haven't lived in a farm country if you've never heard the phrase dumb farmers, because that's what many times educated people talk about farmers. But I like them to see them do the farmer's job in education. Because let me tell you something, like dairy farmer, every cow has its milk weighed as it gets milked. And it gets recorded. They did this before electronics. And then they have to keep a schedule as to when they come off and become dry, and then when do they come in heat, when do you artificially inseminate them or put them with a bull, and then how long is it going to be before the calf is born, and then after the calf is born, then they get the calf for a couple of weeks, and they get weaned from the calf, and they start producing milk for another year or two. It's not a dumb business. You got to know what you're doing. Crop rotation, fertilizers, whether to use them or not, or what do you do? Harvesting, when do you harvest, when do you water? It's not a dumb thing. It takes a lot of education to be a farmer. Taking care of the equipment, purchasing the equipment, knowing when to sell it, when not to buy it. All kinds of stuff happens to a farmer. They're not dumb. But people get a view of farmers and think that they're some dumb hicks. And they're not. They're intelligent people. They know a lot about their job. I appreciate you saying that because people do pick up stuff from others. Is that what you meant? That they-
But we may not even be aware of how much we're paying.
Oh, of course, yeah, until somebody points it out to us. Yeah. We may not be aware that we have anger attitudes against a race of people. We might just think it's natural.
I had an incident, many, but when I was a bus driver, I used to take people down to a summer camp in Lakewood,
Uh-huh.
and as the kids got home, I say about 8 years old and down, they would speak to the bus driver. Hey, I do blah, blah, blah. I said, the older kid, and he said nothing,
So nothing to you.
nothing.
They had learned.
Yeah, it was a learned behavior.
Yeah. They had learned. Yep.
And Pastor, also, when you think back, when on September 11th, 2001, the aftermath of that,
Yeah.
the sentiment that was all across our nation
Yeah.
was Muslims are
Any
bad.
Muslim is
Yeah,
fair game.
right.
Yep. And you know, the thing that disgusts me so much is that it was taught in churches to do that. Churches taught that stuff.
I think we should be able to turn it around on ourselves and look at Caucasians in history. You know, Adolf Hitler,
Yeah,
you know, look at serial murderers.
yeah.
You know, most of them are Caucasian.
Yeah.
So if we apply that to other ethnicities, they can turn around and do the same to us.
Well, of course they do.
You know, there's been plenty of Caucasians done terrible things in history.
Yeah. The bottom line of this class is we want to look at what sins is God identifying with our prejudices and our hatreds. What sin is God identifying? And then how do we correct those sins? Because Jesus specifically used that Samaritan and many other examples with Samaritans specifically to teach you need to love your neighbor. What was the question that engendered the Samaritan story? Who's my neighbor? The scribe was trying to trick Jesus because they didn't have an answer in the two schools of thought between Hillel and Shammai. They didn't have an answer. And Jesus came out with the story. And he said, well, so which one was a neighbor to the man in need? Well, the Samaritan. Well, then go and do likewise. And you know, following Jesus, you can't hate people. You can't hate the color of people's skin. You can't pass judgment on people and follow Jesus at the same time. You can't do it. Everybody needs to be treated based upon who they are and what they do, not the color of their skin or their family tree or anything of that nature. And just because one person from this nationality did this to hurt you, doesn't mean everybody in that nationality is going to do the same, and yet we make those conclusions so easily. I mean, there are churches that teach to be prejudiced. They teach you hatred. Churches, evangelical churches, that teach these things. Because if you're not a good old boy, you don't belong here. And that's the way they put it. I know a church in the Midwest, family goes to it, and they are filled with hatred towards different ethnicities of people, just filled with it. And if you bring up Revelation chapter 5 and 7 and show it to them, they'll say, well, it's going to have to take a big miracle for me to do that. Boasting in that. Bill and Doris lived for a while in the Midwest. And I'm sure you ran across people that were really tough when it came to acceptance of other nationalities. I'm not going to ask you to give me testimony, but I know you did because it's the Midwest. And it's just the way you think. It's just how you think and how you do stuff. You know the city that does the best in the South in dealing with nationalities is New Orleans. Why?
Is there a mixture?
It's a big mixture. A big mixture. And you know what you find? Whenever you get a situation where there's a mixture and you're forced to live together in that mixture and work together in that mixture, you usually find people that accept one another real well and do not become prejudiced because they're used to it. They're okay, they like it. I'm going to use one example. Our son, and that's not to boast, it's just I'm proud of Timmy for this. Tim went to Messiah College in Pennsylvania. Now, Messiah College had about 4 black students in the whole college. You knew who they were because they were in every picture in the brochure. I'm serious. They made sure they were in every picture of the brochure. He was an education major, and he was going to do student teaching. He missed Neptune High School at Messiah. He missed it. He did not like the lily whiteness of the campus and the way he went to Neptune, and Neptune was at that time probably 55 or 60% black and 25% Hispanic, and the rest were white or mixed. He missed that. So he when it came for assignments for student teaching, they're looking for towns around Messiah that would accept student teachers. And the professor said, well, we got this one place. I know nobody wants to go there, but I have to tell you about it anyway. It's called Harrisburg. His hand shot up. Did you hear me? I said Harrisburg. He said, yeah, I want to go there. And the reason he wanted to go there was he wanted to be with a mixture of variety of ethnicity. He missed it because he found it good. People are afraid of Neptune High School. Well, there's reasons to be afraid. There are things that happen bad at Neptune High School, but there's good things that happen at Neptune High School too. Noreen graduated Neptune High School. We had 6 kids graduate Neptune High School. They didn't get beat up. They had a good time. Had a good education for what they were looking for. The drugs at Wall High School are worse than the drugs at Neptune, I know.
More kids can afford it.
It doesn't, that's right, they got the designer drugs.
That's right.
It doesn't matter your environment, is the person following God or not? I'm going to close class, one thing that still, I hope before the day I die, this changes. I still don't like the fact that the most discriminatory time is 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings in evangelical churches. I don't like that. I hope it changes before I die. And it's not just the fault of the whites, it's the fault of the blacks too, and other colors too. Because they all tend to go to what they are, what they want. But the church didn't start out that way. The church started out with a mixture of ethnicities, as we're going to see next week when we look at who were the 4 leaders of the church. Let me give you a little taste. There was one from the Jerusalem area, Palestine area. There was one from Asia. His name was Paul of Tarsus. And there were 2 from Ethiopia. So it was an Asian, a Mediterranean, and 2 black guys. They were the ones that were the beginning of the leadership of the New Testament church. How you like those beans? We should learn from that and be happy. I am happy when I see people of color in our church. I am thrilled when I even just did a blank with young Louis. He can't learn very much, I have to say. He doesn't know English. But he comes all the time. He sits with us all the time. He's happy. I'm thrilled that Louis is here. And now, Carlos, is it Carlos? No, Marco. He knows Spanish. He helps him and understands. And it's great to see. I love it when the rescue guys are here. I love it when others come, different nationalities. I wish that we could get some Asians to come here. Maybe Noreen can get some of her violin and cello students to come here. It's just, we miss out on so much when we don't have a mixture of ethnicity together. We miss out on so much. You miss out on so much. It does my heart good to see my grandchildren playing with the guys from the rescue mission. And it's not just the color of their skin, it's the situation they're in life. It doesn't bother them. They're like Feeny. Feeny was Isaac's dog that died. Dogs don't know anything. They love everybody. They're good examples of Jesus. They love everybody. I do hope, before I die, that God makes that transformation happen in Little Community Baptist Church. Again, this is not for, I'm not doing this to change Christianity in America. I'm doing it to change our church. And if I get to see that before I die, I'll have a smile on my face when they cremate me.